Color kicks, also known as rainbow kicks, are slowly taking over the scene, and who knows, they might even become the new Zaagkick. Cardination is one of the artists that's really pushing this sound alongside Anderex and D-Venn, and it sounds something like this. Don't forget to download the template I'm making for free with the link below. If you want to cheat, we just dropped a color kick sample pack with 50 plus professional color kicks, including a kick builder and kick templates, and it's also linked below. Let's get right into it. I'll show you how to make it with Chroma, and I'll show you how to make it with Vocodex. Here are some variations I made with this method. First, we have the punch. This one is affected by Chroma and actually sounds like this. I added volume automation to control the release of Chroma. And I'm adding a reverb automation. Then we have a punch bass. We have a rumble. And we have an offbeat punch reverb or just the punch itself. Together it sounds like this. All of these individual samples are in the mixer and I'll show it right here. First we have our punch. Then we have the punch duplicated into the punch reverb, which then sounds like this. Then we have our punch bass. And we have our stutter reverb offbeat thingy. These four things go into one channel called the punch main. And then this punch main goes into a final kick buzz right here. Finally we have our rumble, which immediately goes into the final kick buzz. Together it sounds like this. A trick I usually use because the reverb gets a little bit overwhelmed by all the distortion in the final buzz or in the punch channel, I just duplicate it into the punch channel here as well as the final kick buzz, as you can see. So you kind of get double reverb. Let's work in 155 BPM. The first thing you want to look for is a normal punch. In the color kick expansion, we have normal punches for you. It really doesn't matter what you do, just take it and put it in the mixer like this. You want to find a punch bass, but these are usually made with punchy EDM kicks. So you can just find something like this, get rid of the punch like this, just keep the bass. For the rumble, if we take a punchy kick like this and we add reverb, then get rid of the highs, then add an inflator like this, add Pro Q, and put it on the side, so the sub is mono. Then we add a soft clipper to really boost it. Then you can play around with dispersers, and you can distort it more. Take that into a channel like this, and maybe combine that with a punch reverb. Add the punch reverb sample into your playlist and the mixer. Add that to this buzz channel in here as well. So you have the punch reverb and the rumble. Add another inflator to squash it together to 0 dB. And let's just clip it a little bit. Just play around and see what happens. And now just tweak frequencies until you find something that works well. So you could add a little bit of distortion. If we render this out, you've kind of found your rumble tail like this, and this would serve for a color kick. Instead of doing that, I'm just going to use one of our rumble samples. I like this one. Now we have everything to get to work. Into the mixer. Let's separate a little bit. So, with our punch, which we have to route into the main punch channel, but also into the reverb channel. Let's make a channel here and a channel here. Punch bass goes into the main channel as well, and the punch reverb as well. So now we have our punch section. What's left is the rumble and the punch main to go into one channel called the main kick. Now we have the setup. First thing you want to do is work on the reverb. Usually I use Valhalla Room, but in this case another plugin like Fruity Convolver works really well. Just make sure you don't have dry and just a lot of reverb. And in this case, make sure you don't high cut it. Add OTT, depth like this and downward like that. Fruity limiter to control it, and obviously also an EQ to cut the bass and the highs. In this case, you really do want a little bit of the highs. Let's add it during the punch. and at the end. In the main punch channel, just add a wave shaper so it doesn't go over 0 dB. And in the main kick as well. I always like to add an inflator with a little bit of an effect. And for the reverb, I kind of like to open up the stereo image, so it's a little bit more wide. Let's blend the punch and crunch together a little bit more, so we really get that drive. I'm listening to the phase and how the bass sounds, and I maybe pitch it up a little bit to make it work better. Now, how I process kicks, pretty straightforward. I always want to add a transient shaper. You can use KHS transient shaper. Add a tech and add a pump, which is just going to kind of cut into the punch and make it more snappy. Then I like to add serum effects. This will cause phasing issues, so just render the kick and don't have it play all the time. We're gonna add a compressor on multiband and take that down. Take down the level to find really cool frequencies. Then I'm gonna load up LFO tool or serum effects, but I wanna see what happens to the filter. And I really like the all-pass filter for these kicks, because if you add a lot of resonance, you can see the bass gets back into the kick. And then if you move around the cutoff, it really cuts into the lows like this and the low mids, which kind of cleans up the kick and makes it a little bit more hollow. This will be useful later. Now I just add soft clipper. And it's already kind of decent. Now, why Chroma is such a cool plugin is because you can just go to the punch, throw on Chroma. Why the reverb channel is cool is because if you change Chroma in the punch channel, the reverb will automatically be affected as well. In Chroma, you can basically just take the range, so it's gonna affect everything. Then you can add color, which is probably just adding a longer release, as you can hear, and makes it more resonant. So like the color and the chord really comes through. 150 works well. And then you can check the root note as well as the scale. So to start off, just use the pentatonic scale and play around with the root note until it kind of matches with your punch. F sharp works well. And I don't think that, like, you know, D sharp works as well, so you just gotta play around. A seems to work. We can make it stop clipping in the punch if we add a wave shaper. And in the punch, I also want to get rid of the bass because we added the punch bass. So now we kind of have a chord step. I mentioned controlling the punch because, as you can hear, the chord is playing. So create automation clip, remove the ceiling. I'm going to control that the punch plays like this, and then stops playing and kind of opens up, so we maybe introduce a little bit of that color. So now a thing you can do is create the offbeat chord punch. What you could do is render out the chord reverb. Take the best part of the reverb, which is around here, and put that on like a triplet offbeat, like this. And now just take that offbeat chord into the mixer as well and add that to the punch main. Add normalization and maybe some gain. Now you really get that rhythm. But instead of using the chord, you could just also use the punch again, which is also going through Chroma, and then you can do this. But we are sweeping the gain of that punch right here, so just open that up. An option you have is to also sweep that open like this. So now I just go into the main kick, and I really play around and clean it up. The thing you want to add maybe is Pro Q, cut the bass, stereo placement, side, and just make sure that the sub is mono. You can go back into LFO tool and change the cutoff. And you can play around with the punch however you like. An issue with rendering out the reverb like we did here is that it doesn't really change with the punch. So in that case, you could also just use the punch as offbeat. Now you just get to play around with doing different punches, and it gives different sounds as well. So this is a normal mid intro punch, but that sounds dope. You can add a little bit more transient shaping after the effects right here. This is sounding decent. Just quickly going to duplicate the template to show you the Vocodex method. The only difference with Vocodex is to take the punch, but also add serum, or use any VST, add the pattern, just make a simple pattern. Minor pentatonic, and we're gonna put that on G sharp for now. Add serum, and just add that next to the punch, but then also get an empty channel next to Serum and the punch. Get both of these into one channel, and this is going to be called Vocodex. Nothing really changes in the setup except for the fact that you're adding Vocodex. So Vocodex goes into the main punch, and Vocodex goes into the punch reverb. The punch only goes into Vocodex, and Serum goes into Vocodex, that's it. On the punch, just get rid of Chroma. In here, just add Vocodex like this. So for modulator, you want to use the punch, and the carrier is going to be Serum. Now just make the chord longer, full beat, so it also affects the punch here. I'll just mute this for now. Here's how it sounds with this setup. So let's get into the final part. When you're using the Vocodex method, there's a few things you can touch in Vocodex to really change the character of the kick. The main and most important knob is the width of the bands. Then you can change the bands. The more bands, the clearer it gets. That's really dope, but you can also take it down a lot. And add a lot and you get this big fat saw. You can change the release to make it snappier. You can add more mix, which is kind of like a sound goodizer, I think. And then finally, you can also change the tone, the modulator pitch shift, which is going to make it male and female. Something that people don't really touch is the graph here. So you can use the band gain multiplier to add volume to certain bands. But something that's really dope as well is modulator pitch shift. In here, I think you can change the pitch of different bands individually from each other, and it sounds like this. Here's how you make Vocodex very unique. So once you've played around with all these knobs, you can also go into Serum or your VST and change the sound. So let's keep it basic and first change the waveform to something like this, for example, or something like this, or spectral ones. But you can also change the unison. And you can change the width of the unison here to keep it mono. You can add an LFO on a high rate to the fine tune to add some chaos, or you can add a chorus to widen it up. Combining the VST with all those Vocodex settings will give you a lot of different kicks. Another trick to really make it special, as I've shown you, is LFO tool. Play around with Serum effects. And a really important trick, which I'll show you in the Chroma one, is that you can play around with the sound of the punch. Don't play around with Chroma, just play around with how this sounds. So as you can imagine, if you change the punch, it changes the sound. So if we go to the punch and add a formant shift, for example, which could be done with pitch shifter, voice, formant correction, or formant, you really change the sound, but just make sure it's in front of Chroma. Or the pitch. You can change something if you add an effector and really weird stuff. Just make sure it's not on bypass and it plays all the time. Or use a phaser, I don't know. Another trick you can do, which is pretty cool, is use the punch reverb. But instead of using the fruity reverb one, I really want to show you Valhalla Supermassive. Just make sure the delay is at around this range. And as you can hear, it kind of adds a delay, and if you warp it and make it a little bit more reverby, it still sounds really cool, but it makes it sound a little bit more organic. If you use fruity reverb and those together, you get a really wide sound. What you can do is add LFO tool, take volume and make it look something like this. Open that up. And then just add a high rate. And now you really get that crunchy sound that you maybe want. Feel free to clean it up. So that's basically the setup. Don't forget to download this template for free. If you want to upgrade it, just get the Kick Expansion Volume 1. I think it's really worth it. Let us know what you want to see in the future, and thank you so much for watching.